3 days before the wedding, the dress finally arrived, tailored perfectly to fit. 2 days before, a replacement box showed up at the door, sent by someone claiming the original had a manufacturing flaw. Nobody had actually reported one. The new dress was 2 sizes too small, and the seamstress had no openings left before the ceremony. Somewhere between the bridal shop and the front porch, someone had quietly made a decision meant to unravel an entire wedding day, and she was about to find out exactly who. Before we begin tonight, if stories like this move you, take a moment to press that subscribe button, then leave a comment below to say where you're watching from. It genuinely helps a story like this find the people who need it most. Now let's begin, because a dress arriving 2 sizes too small is about to unravel something Claire never expected to find, hiding just beneath the surface of her own wedding. Claire and Ryan had been engaged for just over a year, planning a modest, intimate wedding for early June, the kind of celebration built around close friends and family, rather than anything extravagant. Claire worked as a physical therapist, steady and warm in the particular way that made patients trust her instantly, and she'd fallen for Ryan slowly, over shared dinners and long weekend hikes, certain by their 2nd year together that she'd found something worth building a life around. Ryan felt the same, and their wedding planning for the most part had gone smoothly, one small, manageable detail at a time. Diane, Ryan's mother, had never been openly hostile toward Claire, though something in her warmth toward her future daughter-in-law never quite settled into genuine ease. Diane had adored Ryan's previous girlfriend, Melissa, a polished, ambitious woman Ryan had dated for nearly 4 years before their relationship ended quietly, amicably, simply 2 people who'd grown in different directions. Diane had never fully accepted that ending, holding on to a quiet, persistent belief that Ryan and Melissa had simply hit a rough patch rather than genuinely parted ways, a belief she'd never voiced directly to Ryan, but had never managed to fully let go of either. Claire noticed Diane's careful, distant politeness over the 2 years she'd known her, though she told herself, the way many brides do, that time and a wedding date would eventually soften whatever reservations lingered beneath the surface. Ryan noticed less of it, generally trusting and easygoing, assuming his mother's slight formality with Claire was simply Diane's nature rather than anything more deliberate. Neither of them had any reason yet to suspect that Diane's quiet disapproval had been steadily building towards something far more active than polite distance. The wedding dress arrived on a bright Tuesday afternoon, 3 days before the ceremony, exactly as ordered, perfectly tailored, after 2 careful fittings at the small bridal boutique Claire had visited with her sister months earlier. Claire tried it on one final time in her apartment, turning slowly in front of her bedroom mirror, feeling the particular, settled joy of a dress that fit exactly right, exactly as she'd imagined it would on the actual day. She hung it carefully in a garment bag in her closet, texting her sister a photo with 3 exclamation points, genuinely thrilled that one of the last major details had finally, perfectly fallen into place. 2 days before the wedding, a delivery arrived at Claire's front door, a box from the same bridal boutique, accompanied by a printed note claiming the original dress had been found to have a manufacturing flaw in the fabric and needed to be replaced immediately. Claire, confused but not yet suspicious, opened the box to find a dress that looked nearly identical to her original at first glance, the same style, the same delicate lace detailing along the bodice. It wasn't until she tried it on, the fabric pulling uncomfortably tight across her shoulders and refusing to zip more than halfway, that she realized this dress was nowhere close to her actual size. Claire called the boutique immediately, her voice tight with the particular panic of a bride 2 days out from her wedding, with a dress that suddenly didn't fit. The woman who answered sounded genuinely confused, pulling up Claire's order history while she waited on hold, her confusion deepening the longer she searched. "Ma'am, I'm not seeing any note here about a manufacturing flaw," the woman said carefully, "and there's no record of us processing a replacement order at all. As far as our system shows, your original dress was already picked up and delivered successfully, 3 days ago. Claire stood frozen in her bedroom, the too small dress still half-zipped around her shoulders, staring at the garment bag in her closet, where she'd hung her actual dress just 2 days earlier, the one she'd photographed with such relief, the one that fit exactly right. She unzipped the bag slowly, half expecting, half dreading what she'd find, and felt her stomach drop completely when she discovered the bag was empty, her real wedding dress nowhere to be found, replaced somehow, by someone, with a dress that had never come from the boutique's actual system at all. Claire called Ryan first, her voice shaking as she explained what had happened, standing in her bedroom with an ill-fitting dress still clinging awkwardly to her shoulders and an empty garment bag hanging open beside her. Ryan listened carefully, his confusion mounting alongside hers. "That doesn't make sense," he said. "Someone would have needed a key to your apartment, or you would have had to let them in yourself. Who else has access to your place?" Claire ran through the short list in her mind. Her sister, her best friend and maid of honor, the building's superintendent for emergencies, none of whom had any conceivable reason to swap her wedding dress for one 2 sizes too small. Ryan drove over within the hour, examining the too small dress and the mysterious delivery note, with the same confused frustration Claire felt, turning the packaging over in his hands, as though it might reveal something neither of them had noticed yet. The note's typed, no signature, no direct contact information beyond the boutique's general address, he said. This wasn't sent by the actual store. Someone printed this to look official. Claire nodded, her mind already racing ahead to the practical crisis sitting underneath the mystery. "Ryan, the wedding is in 2 days. I don't have a dress. I don't know where my actual dress is, and even if we find it, I don't know if there's time left to fix whatever's happened to it." They spent that evening calling every possible connection. The delivery company listed on the box, the boutique's manager directly, even a locksmith to check whether Claire's apartment door showed any signs of forced entry, which it didn't, deepening the mystery of exactly how someone had accessed her closet without any obvious break-in. The delivery company confirmed only that the package had come from a legitimate account associated with the boutique's business address, though the boutique itself insisted no employee had authorized any such shipment, leaving both Claire and Ryan increasingly certain that someone with real, specific access to boutique paperwork had orchestrated this deliberately. The next morning, Claire's maid of honor, Jenna, called with a detail she'd almost forgotten to mention, uncertain if it even mattered. "This is probably nothing," Jenna said carefully, "but I remember seeing Diane at the boutique when I dropped off my bridesmaid dress for alterations last week. She was talking to one of the staff members for a while, and I just assumed she was picking up something for the wedding. But now that you're telling me all this, I don't know, it felt a little odd at the time." Claire felt something cold settle into her stomach at Ryan's mother's name surfacing in connection with the boutique, a possibility she hadn't allowed herself to fully consider until this exact moment. She mentioned it carefully to Ryan that evening, watching his face shift from confusion into a slower, more troubled kind of realization. "My mom was at the boutique," he repeated slowly, working through the implication even as he clearly didn't want to. "Claire, I don't want to believe she'd actually do something like this, but I also don't have a better explanation for how someone got access to boutique paperwork and your apartment closet without any sign of forced entry." Claire watched him carefully, understanding how difficult this particular suspicion was for him to sit with. A mother he loved, potentially responsible for something this deliberately cruel, 2 days before his own wedding. Ryan called his mother that same evening, keeping his tone carefully neutral, asking simply whether she'd stopped by Claire's bridal boutique recently for any reason. Diane's answer came a beat too quickly, too smoothly rehearsed, for an innocent, unplanned encounter. "I might have stopped in briefly, just to see how the wedding preparations were coming along," she said. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" Ryan felt his stomach tighten at his mother's practiced, careful tone, recognizing something in it he'd rarely heard from her before, and he ended the call quickly, telling her only that he needed to check on something, unable yet to fully accuse her of anything without more certainty, though every instinct he had was rapidly narrowing toward an answer neither he nor Claire wanted to actually confirm. Ryan drove to his mother's house the next morning, unable to shake the previous night's conversation, needing to see her face directly rather than continue guessing over the phone. Diane opened the door with her usual warm smile, though something behind her eyes flickered the moment she registered Ryan's expression, serious and unusually guarded. "I need to ask you something directly, Mom, and I need an honest answer," Ryan said, stepping into the living room, without waiting for an invitation. "Did you have anything to do with Claire's wedding dress being swapped for the wrong size?" Diane's composure faltered visibly, a long pause stretching before she finally answered, her voice smaller than Ryan had ever heard it. "I only wanted to slow things down a little, Ryan. I wasn't trying to ruin anything. I just needed more time." Ryan felt something in his chest go cold at the casual, almost reasonable way his mother described what she'd actually done, as though delaying his wedding through deliberate deception were a small, understandable request rather than a genuine betrayal. "More time for what, exactly?" he asked, his voice tightening. "Time for what, Mom?" Diane sat down slowly on the edge of the sofa, her hands twisting together in her lap. "I know you loved Melissa once, Ryan. I always thought, somewhere deep down, that the two of you would find your way back to each other eventually. When you got engaged to Claire so quickly after things ended with Melissa, I panicked. I thought if I could just create a little delay, a little more space before the wedding, maybe you'd have time to really think about what you actually wanted." Ryan stared at his mother, the full weight of her confession landing slowly, painfully, as 3 years of engagement and a genuine, chosen relationship with Claire were reduced, in his mother's mind, to a rash decision that simply needed more time to reconsider. "Mom, I've been with Claire for over 2 years, Ryan said, his voice shaking now with a mixture of disbelief and anger he rarely let surface around his mother. "I didn't rush into this. I chose her, carefully, deliberately, exactly the way you're supposed to choose someone you want to marry. Melissa and I ended things because we wanted different lives. That was never a mistake. I needed more time to reconsider." Diane's eyes filled with tears, though whether from genuine remorse or simply from being caught, Ryan couldn't yet tell for certain. "I still have the actual dress, Ryan," she admitted quietly. "It's in my hall closet. I was going to return it once the wedding got postponed, once you'd had enough time to reconsider." Ryan retrieved the dress from his mother's hall closet himself, checking it carefully for any damage, relieved to find it perfectly intact, still zipped protectively inside its original garment bag. "I'm taking this to Claire right now," he said, his voice firm in a way Diane clearly wasn't accustomed to hearing from her generally easygoing son. "And I need you to understand something clearly before I leave. This wedding is happening in 2 days, exactly as planned, with Claire in the dress she actually chose. If you can't genuinely support that, I need you to at least stop actively working against it, because I won't tolerate this kind of interference again. Not now, not after we're married." Diane nodded slowly, tears still falling, though she said nothing further as Ryan gathered the dress and headed for the door, his mind already working through how he'd explain everything to Claire once he arrived. He drove straight to Claire's apartment, the recovered dress laid carefully across the back seat, replaying his mother's confession over and over, trying to reconcile the version of Diane who'd raised him with genuine love against the version capable of orchestrating something this deliberately deceptive just days before his wedding. He had no idea, pulling into Claire's driveway with her actual dress finally recovered, exactly how she would react to learning the full truth of who had done this and why. Ryan carried the garment bag up to Claire's apartment, his hands unsteady in a way that had nothing to do with the dress itself and everything to do with what he was about to tell her. Claire opened the door, her face lighting with relief the instant she saw the familiar bag draped over his arm, though her relief faded quickly once she read the tension in his expression. "You found it," she said. "Ryan, where was it? Who had it?" He set the dress down carefully across her couch before answering, needing a moment to steady himself before saying the words out loud. "It was my mother," he said finally. "She swapped it herself. She admitted everything." Claire stood frozen for a long moment, processing the specific, quiet betrayal of a woman who'd sat across from her at family dinners for 2 years, who'd hugged her at Thanksgiving, who'd never once given any indication she was capable of something this deliberately cruel. "Why, Ryan?" she asked, her voice smaller than she meant it to sound. "What did I ever do to her?" Ryan sat down beside her, taking her hand, and told her everything Diane had confessed. The lingering hope for Melissa, the belief that delaying the wedding might somehow undo a choice Ryan had made carefully and completely 2 years earlier. Claire listened in silence, her hurt slowly hardening into something steadier, more resolved. "She thought creating a crisis 2 days before our wedding would make you reconsider marrying me," Claire said slowly, testing the sentence for how absurd it actually sounded out loud. That's what she actually believed would work. Ryan nodded, still visibly shaken by his own mother's reasoning. "I told her this ends now. I told her the wedding happens exactly as planned, and if she can't support it honestly, she at least needs to stop interfering." Claire studied Ryan's face carefully, searching for any trace of the hesitation his mother had clearly been hoping to find, and found instead something unwavering, entirely certain. "I need to know you're not going to spend our marriage quietly managing this, making excuses for her every time something like this happens," Claire said. Ryan met her eyes directly. "I'm not making excuses tonight, and I won't be making them going forward either. What she did was wrong, deliberately, and dangerously close to actually costing us our wedding day. I need her to understand that clearly, and I need you to know I meant every word I said to her." The wedding proceeded 2 days later, exactly as planned. Claire walking down the aisle in the dress she'd chosen from the very beginning, the one that fit perfectly, the one that had nearly been taken from her entirely by someone determined to hold on to a version of Ryan's life that no longer existed. Diane attended, seated quietly near the back rather than in her usual place of prominence near the front, a small, deliberate adjustment Ryan had insisted on, not as punishment exactly, but as an honest reflection of the trust she'd have to rebuild, rather than simply assume. She watched her son marry a woman she'd tried to quietly push aside, her expression unreadable through most of the ceremony, though Claire noticed, walking back down the aisle afterward, that Diane's eyes were wet with what looked like something closer to genuine reckoning than simple sentiment. The months that followed brought slow, careful rebuilding rather than any dramatic reconciliation. Diane didn't apologize fully or easily, though she stopped mentioning Melissa entirely, stopped the subtle comparisons she'd once made without quite realizing how transparent they'd become. She began, gradually, asking Claire real questions about her work, her family, small gestures that meant more precisely because they arrived without an audience to perform for. Ryan kept a careful, watchful eye on his mother's behavior for months, unwilling to let his guard down completely after discovering exactly how far she'd once been willing to go. A year into the marriage, at a quiet family dinner that looked, on its surface, almost entirely ordinary, Diane arrived early to help Claire in the kitchen, an offer she'd never once made before the wedding. They worked together in comfortable, careful silence, chopping vegetables side by side, and at one point, without any particular occasion prompting it, Diane simply said, "I'm glad Ryan chose you, Claire. I should have said that a long time ago, instead of trying to quietly undo it." It wasn't a full accounting of everything that had happened, but it was, unmistakably, the first honest acknowledgement Diane had ever offered, and Claire accepted it exactly as it was meant, a genuine, if imperfect, beginning. If this story reminded you that real love chooses itself deliberately and stays chosen even against quiet interference, subscribe before you go, so you never miss the next story like it.